These times are strange, it's quite surreal. It's never been like this. Remember in the good old days when we could hug and kiss. We'd pack the gyms and restaurants and move through public settings. We'd give high fives and drink at dives, hold hands and dance at weddings. Now the days are longer, yet they're darker in a way. We're pressing pause on normalcy, just going day by day. But we can still make jokes and art, garden, dance and sing, cook, read books, try on fun looks and learn about new things. We can talk with friends of ours and have a heart to heart, just so long as we'll stay 6 feet apart, 6 feet apart. It's the newest thing to do. Stay 6 feet apart, 6 feet apart. The distance between me and you, 6 feet apart, 6 feet apart. And when I say I'll keep you very close to my heart, it's purely metaphorical. These times are quite historical, so step aside, let's live our lives 6 feet apart.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to 6 Feet Apart Productions. We are so thrilled you're here and so grateful for all the support. We do take pride in being able to pay our storytellers, so we do want to thank you very much for buying a ticket. So welcome to you, everybody watching on YouTube. Hello. Please put some comments in the chat. Tell us where you're watching from, what you're doing, what you're wearing or not wearing. Send the storytellers some love because they will check the chat as well. And it's lovely to go back and see what comments people have done. Now, before we start our show, we're going to bring in our backstage audience. So we've got quite a few people with us today. So hi, everybody. Everybody wave. Lovely to have you all here. Thank you. So now we're going to get on with our show. And as we know, we've got 4 storytellers. And before each storyteller, we're going to interview them. So just a very quick interview to get to know them a little bit better. And today we've got a slightly different type of storytelling show. All the tellers are going to combine a traditional tale with a personal story and weave them in and out into a lovely braided story that we're all going to listen to. I think it's incredibly clever. I could never do that. And so this is why I wanted to do it. And we've got 4 of the very best tellers going to give you their stories tonight. So on with the show then. Our first storyteller is going to be Mo Reynolds. Mo is hilarious. I love Mo. She is based in beautiful Northwest Montana, which is somewhere on my bucket list to go. She tells stories at schools and communities all around Montana, leads workshops on storytellers, and is known for her gorgeous, fabulous bandanas. And back in the before times, she used to perform at festivals all over the country. But during lockdown, she redecorated her room, which you'll see in a minute, and jumped into virtual storytelling like an absolute pro. And now she goes off into the woods like a bear and tells stories live on Facebook. So you can check her out. She was also in our Humor Us show back in May, and you can go and watch that. She did a hilarious story on that one, and that's on our website or YouTube channel. You can go and do that, and we'll put some links in the chat. Mo also writes a fantastic blog on her website. How dare she be good at writing as well? It's very annoying, far too talented. And we will put details all about how you can find out more about Mo and how to find out about her. So that will all be in the chat. So before we get to her to tell a story, though, I'd like to introduce to our virtual stage, Mo Reynolds. Hi, Mo. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm really well, thank you. Yes. Now, are you doing all right there in Montana at the moment?
Yes, I'm locked in my outhouse.
Yes, it is a bit of an outhouse, isn't it?
My sauna. It's my sauna. No, but yes, I'm doing great. We're about to have our fall, which usually lasts about 3 days, and then it's winter. So had it's a lovely 3 days. It's very nice.
Oh. We don't seem to get it at all. We just get summer for literally 11 months of the year, and if we're lucky, we'll get a couple of sneezes of rain. Anyway, so one of the reasons why we're doing this show is because you were with an impetus for this. You told a brilliantly funny braided story at the Women's Storytelling Festival in March of this year that we both were on. So when did you first get the idea of how to do weaving stories together, and how long did it take you to get it right?
So it was sort of this serendipitous moment. That's a word. I was on a plane flying to perform at the Florida Storytelling Festival, and I was sort of finalizing in my mind what stories I wanted to tell, and it was like all of these different stories, and I sort of had this story about my mom that I really wanted to tell, and I also had this folktale, and suddenly I just had the thought, I wonder, like, I don't know, in my mind, they just sort of zippered together, and I thought, I wonder if I could play with this, and so I started sketching it out, and then I just went for it in Florida, and I loved it, and it felt really right to me. And then that was 2 years ago, I guess. And then it kind of has just evolved into something I really like to do often in my stories, and kind of weaving them together. So, but that's when it landed, was on the plane trip to Florida. That's when it started.
Incredible where these things just hit us, isn't it? You just got to go with your intuition, don't you?
Yeah.
You do it really well. You do it really well. So I'm very impressed. Now, you've been telling stories for quite some time, haven't you? Have you got like a really memorable or funny or weird experience that you've had?
Well, actually, I was thinking about that festival, the Florida Storytelling Festival 2 years ago. That was my first time as a featured teller. And I tried on Saturday night, you perform Thursday, Friday, and then Saturday night, I decided to try something where I would, this is what I used to do with my kids, right? I would ask my kids, okay, give me a place and 2 animals and a problem. And then I would create a story off the top of my head. And I just decided to roll with that. And I'd done it sometimes for like middle school students or whatever. And some insanity infected my brain. And I thought, I'm going to try it live here with this audience. And by then I felt like I had created enough of a sense of trust with the audience. They had been there for a few nights. And I felt like I could do it. I was a wreck. I was so nervous, but I listened. I was the last performer, so I was able to kind of take notes on all of the other storytellers, and then get up, and I got ingredients from the audience, and then just like went with it and told this really crazy version of, I think it was Hansel and Gretel, or I don't know what all the fairy tales were. And it was nuts. But it was such a fun, delightful evening. And that whole night was just this like magical chemistry. And anyway, that's probably the most energy I've ever felt on stage, whether nerves or genius or something in the middle. But it was really an amazing night.
Oh, that's fantastic.
It was really fun. All of the tellers were so on that night. It was really fun.
Nice. Well, that's really nice.
And okay. Simon was there. He's in the backstage.
Oh, yeah. Simon's everywhere, isn't
he? we need more Simon everywhere.
So now, Mo, I want you to settle in, get yourself ready. Everyone in the audience, get yourself ready, because Mo is going to tell her story, which is called Slow and Steady. So welcome, Mo Reynolds.
I was on the bottom of Mount Kilimanjaro, the tallest freestanding mountain in the world, tucked in the jungles in Tanzania on the east coast of Africa. I had my boots, my backpack, my super cool walking stick, and my bright yellow poncho. I was like a page out of an REI catalog. There was this beautiful, enchanting mist in the jungle, and I wanted to absorb every morsel of the adventure. And that poncho, it was getting between me and my adventure morsels. So I took it off, I stuffed it in my backpack, and I began to walk and just savor the experience. And then the experience got really cold and wet, and I started throwing up. I threw up trail mix and power bars and power gels and dried blueberries, and my brain lost the ability to communicate with my mouth. There just wasn't enough oxygen. But I kept walking. I shuffled my way, and finally I pulled into that first hut, dragging my super cool walking stick behind me. All the other young college students were there, huddled around the camp stove, cooking their dehydrated lasagna, and I ripped into my MRE packet that my dad had sent with me, and I'm pretty sure he had had it in the Vietnam conflict. And there was some sort of brown paste that I think was supposed to be like peanut butter, and then there was like hardtack. And I looked at it and thought, this is definitely going to stay down. And it didn't. I stepped out onto the porch and it reintroduced itself to the world. I began rubbing my face really vigorously, trying to wake up from this nightmare. And in doing so, I inadvertently caught my left contact lens with my finger and popped it out of my eye. I took a step back to find the errant lens, and I discovered that there were no guardrails on any porches in Tanzania. And so I fell, it was about 5 or 6 feet off the ground, and I fell off the porch and then rolled several times until I came to a complete stop. The animals had all stopped what they were doing and had gathered in the jungle on the other side of Africa, in Ghana. And they were there, big and small, to listen to the tiger. I don't know how a tiger got into West Africa. It's suspension of disbelief. Every night the tiger would tell a story. And every night Anansi was there waving his arms, Mr. Tiger, I have such a story to tell. And every night Tiger would say, no, you're too small. But this night, Tiger grinned, but not a grin you want to see on a tiger. He said, Anansi, I'll make you a deal. Everyone's whining to me about the new big snake down by the river. They have to go all the way around and drink from the other side. If you get rid of the snake, then you can tell a story. I can do it. And off Anansi ran. All of the animals watched Anansi go. And then they turned, and everyone glared at Tiger. Everyone stared at me. My guess is they were estimating the cost of chartering a helicopter to Mount Kilimanjaro. But I eased their concerns by laughing, probably in a maniacal way, and then stumbled my way to the hut and quickly fell asleep. The next day was Sunday, and this group of friends from college, we wanted to take it as our Sabbath, as a day of rest. So we had a little church service, we just enjoyed nature, and this was perfect because it gave my brain and my lungs a chance to catch up to our altitude. So on Monday, I was ready to go, and we went. We climbed out of the jungle, we hiked through the tall grasses, we rose above the clouds. It was spectacular. And then we came to the last hut. We got there at about 10 a.m. and the guides told us to quickly eat our lunch and then go to bed because they would be waking us up at midnight to begin the climb to Uhuru, the summit of Kilimanjaro. Now, they said they wanted to schedule it this way so that we would reach the summit at sunrise, and that sounded really magical. But I think they also wanted us to do it that way so that we couldn't see what we had to climb up. It was the steepest part of our ascent. And this was where I learned the Swahili phrase, pole pole. Pole pole, slowly, slowly. These guides who hiked Kilimanjaro like twice a month in their Converse sneakers with all of our gear on their heads told us to take it slowly, slowly, slowly. I was the pole-poliest of the group, so they put me at the front of the line so I could pace everyone else. We lined up and began to climb. Anansi began to worry. What have I done? He thought. I'm a little spider. How am I going to get rid of a snake? But he kept walking. He walked and he walked until he had a plan. And when he had a plan, he began to run. He ran all the way to the river, and there was Snake curled up in an enormous spiral close to the river. And Anansi began to yell, Mr. Snake, wake up, wake up. And the snake opened his gleaming yellow eyes. Anansi, Mr. Snake, you got to go. There's a new snake in the jungle, and he is big. He is bigger than you. He's going to gobble you up. You got to go. Anansi, how big is this snake? You see that tree over there? You see that tree by the river? How long that tree is? That snake is as long as that tree. And that's longer than you. You got to go. Well, the snake unraveled himself, and he went and he stretched himself out by the tree. And he wasn't as long. See, you got to go. No. Anansi, you tie the tip of my tail to the end of this tree, and I'll stretch. And the snake stretched, and he stretched. But he wasn't as long as that tree. See, Mr. Snake, you got to. No. Anansi, you go to my belly. Tie my belly to the tree. And the snake, he stretched and he stretched, but he wasn't as long as that tree. Mr. Snake, you got to. No. Right behind my head. Anansi, get it right behind my head. And the snake, he stretched and he stretched. And the tip of his nose went past the tip of the tree. Ha! I'm the biggest snake in the jungle. Ha! Poly. I led the way, and everything was great until it wasn't. The nausea returned. My brain began to swim. I pulled to the side so that everyone else could keep a regular pace. And as much as I wanted to keep going, in my heart of hearts, I knew if I did, I would be in great danger. And so I made the heartbreaking decision to turn around and head back down the mountain. And there I waited for everyone else. A little after sunrise, they came literally running down the mountain. And there was no time to talk about the joy of their experience, because when you climb Mount Kilimanjaro, you get a visa for a finite number of days. And we had used one of those days as a Sabbath for a day of rest. And so we had to literally run down the rest of the way. And it wasn't until we were on the bus driving away from the mountain that it settled into my heart. Everyone else had done it. Everyone but me. And as I cried in the back of the bus, I decided I was going to go home and I was going to run a marathon. Anansi, he got right in front of the snake. What other snake are you talking about, Mr. Snake? The other snake that you said was bigger than me, Anansi. I ain't never seen a snake as big as you. You are the biggest snake in the jungle. And the snake realized what Anansi had done and snapped at him, but Anansi was too fast. He jumped up and around Snake's mouth, and he was trapped. But he wasn't done. Anansi still had to push him into the river. A marathon is 26.2 miles. I had a training plan. I had new tennis shoes. I had my first day of training selfie, and I was on my way. And about 20 seconds into my training plan, I remembered a major flaw in my plan. I hated running. I hated it. I had always hated running. So I made it 2 days in my training plan and I quit. This happened at least 2 more times until something in me remembered, Poly. And so I went out and I told myself, I'm going to go out for 30 minutes and I'm going to run until I don't want to anymore. And it was like 30 seconds. And then it was a minute. And then Poly was 5 minutes. And Poly was a 5K. Poly was a 10K. And Poly, I found a group who wanted to run a Poly marathon. And we trained Poly until I was there on the starting line of the Richmond, Virginia Marathon. a little Anansi. He pushed and he pushed all night long. And the sun came up and Anansi kept pushing and pushing. And the snake, he wriggled and he wriggled, but Anansi's threads were too strong. Anansi pushed an inch, a half an inch, all day he pushed. And just as the sun set, plunk, Anansi dropped the snake into the river and watched him float away. Then he turned and began to go home. I began the race, and crowds lined the street. There was music, there were bands, there were funny signs, and I shuffled along, and then I came poly to mile 25, and there was my coach, Paul, who had coached all of us. And he joined in to run that last mile with as many of us as he could find. And he asked me why I wanted to run a marathon. And because I'm a slow runner, I had time to tell him the story. So I told him about Kilimanjaro and Uhuru and my failure. And we got to mile 26 and I could see the finish line and I could hear the bands and I started to cry. And Paul stopped and he hugged me and he said, I'm going to go back and find the next runner. But Morgan, today, you have reached Uhuru. The animals gathered around Tiger, glaring and waiting. And then they heard the shuffling. They parted and let Anansi come in. And Anansi climbed right up in front of Tiger's face. Oh, Mr. Tiger, have I got a story to tell? Anansi told his story. I finished my race. Poly. One thread, one step at a time.
Fantastic. Oh, Mo, that was really a great story. Two stories. I can't believe that when you failed at Kilimanjaro, that I wouldn't have even attempted in the first place, you then thought the next logical thing, I'm going to run a marathon. You're bonkers, completely bonkers, but an excellent storyteller, thank goodness. So now, while we're in between storytellers, I'm just going to say hello to a few people on YouTube. We've got Toby from Washington, Abigail from a very, very wet coast of Canada, Sue from Minnesota, and Eleanor Clement Glass is coming from Oakland, which is very useful because our next storyteller is also from the Bay Area. Linda Yemoto, she was a park ranger for over 35 years and was called Ranger Linda by all the school children and their families. Isn't that lovely? She uses stories to enhance the messages that in her nature programs. And then today she loves adding all the natural and cultural information into her own personal stories. She was on the board of directors at the National Storytelling Network for 6 years. And then since she retired, she volunteers as a storyteller and docent at the San Francisco Asian Art Museum, where she enjoys interpreting the art through storytelling. Now, Linda is also a part of the Asian American Storytellers in Unity, who have recently created a YouTube channel of stories and activities to promote awareness and appreciation of Asian American culture. We'll be putting all the links in the chat, so please go and check out their videos. They're completely free, they're fun, they're for mostly primary kids, but they're really good. Now, before we have Linda tell her story, though, we want to find out a bit more about Ranger Linda. So please welcome to our virtual stage, Linda Yamoto. Hi, Linda, how are you? How are you?
Hi, I'm good. Wait a minute, I gotta unmute.
Oh, we've lost you.
Okay, now we're good. We're good. I'm good.
We've been having outages all over the place, so I'm really hoping you're going to be all right.
Yeah, let's hope so.
Now, Linda, you actually chaired the Bay Area Storytelling Festival for over 30 years, didn't you? So can you tell us a bit about that? For example, how big was it? Where was it held? What compelled you to keep
Oh
it for
gosh.
30 years?
For 30 years. Oh, I love that festival. It was so wonderful because the best part about it was we created community. You know, we had over 40 people that would come and volunteer to help us put on the festival. We had over a dozen people that work year round on a committee, to create it. It was, for most of the years, it was in a regional park because I work for the regional park district. So it was a beautiful outdoor setting with tents and an outdoor amphitheater. And the best part about it was being able to bring storytellers, just absolutely wonderful tellers from across the country and around the world to the Bay Area. Because, at the time, there was no way really of seeing many of these tellers unless you made it to Jonesboro or some other major festival. So I miss it. I miss the festival a lot. I don't miss the work, but I miss the festival. And if there's a group of people out there who are really willing to work hard to, bring it back, I'd be willing to work with them.
So that's a call for any volunteers. Get in touch with us or get in touch with Linda, because we'd love to have another festival in the Bay Area. I'm really sad that it went before I even knew about it.
Yeah, it would be great to bring it back. We'll see.
A lot of work, but how fantastic now that we can do all this on Zoom just for a short time. I mean, I wouldn't have even met you or known any of the storytellers on the show today if it wasn't for the pandemic. So there are some up things for going on Zoom. Definitely. So now, also, Linda, as I mentioned, you're part of the Asian American Storytellers in Unity. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that and why it was formed and how that's going?
Yeah, talk about a good thing that came out of the pandemic is that when the lockdown started, Robert and Nancy of Ethnotech, emailed a bunch of us Asian American storytellers because we're freaking out, all the gigs are disappearing. What are we going to do? So let's get together and support each other and come up with some ideas. And we have been meeting weekly since that time. And one of the wonderful things that came out of it, we've done a number of shows together, but Yasu Ishida said, why don't we create a YouTube channel, mostly for kids, especially for kids who've never seen Asian storytellers, Asian American storytellers, because we know that, prejudices and racist ideas can start really young. So we wanted to reach them young. And so we created this really wonderful YouTube channel of stories and activities of Asian and Asian American storytellers, folk tales, personal tales. I hope you'll look at it because it's really good. And we release a new episode every 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's called Storytopia, isn't it? It's lovely.
Yeah, Asian American Storytopia. Yeah.
Yeah, really good. So go and check that out. We'll put all the links in the YouTube and the Zoom. So go and do that. So now, thank you, Linda. Lovely to get you a bit better. Everyone sit back and relax. We're going to have Linda's story, which is the best title, The Invasion of the Chinese New Year Frogs.
Long, long ago in India, a Buddhist monk traveled from temple to temple throughout the countryside. One evening, his travels took him deep into a forest where he came upon a small wild pig that had been captured in a hunter's trap. The pig was squealing, and the monk could see its despair. And in compassion for the pig, the monk released it from the trap. But according to the laws of the time, he was guilty of theft. But when this matter was brought before the Buddha thought and decided that there had been no crime, because according to the Dharma, the teachings, the monk had acted out of compassion to release that pig and keep it free from being eaten. And that simple act of releasing the pig, it became a Buddhist practice known as live release. And it followed Buddhism through India and into China. And in China, it is called Fang Sheng. Fang, to release, Sheng, living creature. And became quite ritualized and passed down generation after generation after generation. But what you need to understand is it's more than just a good deed, of releasing an animal, because With the right prayers and chants upon release, this animal is given under the protection of Buddhism, with the hope that it lives a long and healthy life and that it too can attain enlightenment, just like Buddha. And in addition, this animal represents all sentient beings. So the hope is that upon the release of this animal, all sentient beings can attain enlightenment. So you can see its deeper meaning. So keeping that all in mind, fast forward about 2,000 years. It was a Saturday in February, 5 minutes until the nature center where I was working was about to close. And it had been a busy day, lots of visitors. We did nature walks and snake talks and puppet shows. And the two student aides, the two college students that were working with me and I, we were ready for the day to be done. We're getting ready to lock the doors when a visitor comes bursting through, rather out of breath, comes up to me and says, "There's a big group of Asian Americans walking down toward Jewel Lake." Okay, I thought, that's nice. And they're carrying 2 big cardboard boxes. Oh, I thought, full of bullfrogs. Oh, I thought, and they're going to release them in Jewel Lake. Oh no, I thought. So I grabbed one of the student aides, Evelyn. We ran out the back door. We jumped into a parked truck and I drove down toward the lake, hoping we would make it in time. Now, at the time of this story, Jewel Lake was a beautiful little 1-acre lake. It was ringed by cattails. It had red-winged blackbirds singing and nesting there. There were willows and alders along the edge. Kingfishers would dive down for fish. There were turtles. And it was the home of our native Pacific chorus frog, which is only this big. They're tiny, but in the springtime, the males have big voices. They sing and sing. In fact, the Pacific chorus frog is the only frog that has that true ribbit, 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 ribbit kind of call. Well, I parked the truck. We walked over to the lake. And sure enough, there were quite a few Asian American looking people. They were all standing along the edge of the lake. And they were chanting, "Nam Myo Guru Be, Nam Myo Buddhaya." And they were looking so happy at all the bullfrogs that were jumping around their feet and swimming away across the lake. So I took a deep breath. Who's in charge here? And a middle-aged man stepped forward. I guess I am. Why? I don't suppose you realize that bullfrogs are not native to California? And when you release them into an environment like this, they will eat anything they can get their mouths around. And bullfrogs can get to be as large as dinner plates. So they will eat fish and snakes and insects and baby turtles and birds, and they can completely wipe out our native Pacific chorus frogs. Oh, no, we didn't know that at all. You see, we're from a Buddhist church in Oakland, and for Chinese New Year's, we went down to Oakland, Chinatown, and we went to 2 markets and we bought as many bullfrogs as our donations would allow. And then they brought the frogs down to the park to release into the lake to practice Fang Sheng, live release. Oh, I said, how many bullfrogs do you think you bought? About 200. Oh, Well, we won't release the turtles then. Turtles? What turtles? They had also bought some turtles. Turtles, are for longevity. They symbolize that. Well, if we can't release the turtles here, where can we release them? Can we release them at Lake Merritt? Now, Lake Merritt is a pretty good sized lake down in downtown Oakland, and it's a natural lake. But I had to explain to him that, well, Lake Merritt is unusual because it's a tidal lagoon. Some of the water comes from the streams from the Oakland Hills, but it's connected to the Oakland estuary. And the Oakland estuary is connected to San Francisco Bay, which is connected to the Pacific Ocean. So the water in Lake Merritt is fresh and salt water. It's called brackish. So, first of all, the turtles are not native to this area that you have. And if you release those into Lake Merritt, they will die a most horrible death. I don't think that's the purpose of live release. Oh, I see. Well, if we can't release turtles or frogs, what can we release? Can we release fish? No. Can we release birds? No. So after much back and forth, the only thing I could think of is, well, perhaps you could release crickets. You could get them from the pet shop, and then you would be saving them from, being eaten, and they wouldn't do too much damage to the environment. Well, I gave them the name of a woman who might be able to take their turtles and put them in homes as pets. And so they took their turtles and they left the park. Evelyn and I looked around, had all these bullfrogs hopping everywhere, and we noticed that some of them didn't look too good. They're kind of hopping sideways and they're on their back. Evelyn reached over and she could pick one up, no problem. So we decided they were probably stunned from being stacked in those cardboard boxes, and we had better try and recapture them tonight, because if we wait till the next day, it'd probably be much harder. Well, luckily, Evelyn's family lived close to the park and they owned 2 kayaks. So she zipped off to get the kayaks. I went back to the office. I called my husband at the time and told him what happened. So he turned to our 2 boys. Sterling was 7 then, and Kenji was 3. Hey, boys, do you want to go help your mom catch bullfrogs at the park? Yeah! So they all came down. We spent about 4 hours on the lake that night. The 2 student aides were in the kayaks. They were paddling along very quietly. They were each holding a flashlight in their mouths. Because if you shine a light in the eyes of a bullfrog, it'll stun them. They'll freeze. So then they would put the paddle down, pick up a long-handled net, and scoop them out of the water. And then they had to dig down, get the bullfrog out of the net, and stick it into a garbage bag, which was at their feet inside the kayak. Now, this worked pretty well until those bags got so full of bullfrogs from clear across the lake. I could hear, ooh, 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 as the bullfrogs were jumping around their kayaks. Well, the 2 boys and I were in a flat-bottomed rowboat. Their father was rowing us very quietly along the edge of the lake. The boys had their flashlights, and I had the long-handled net. Along about midnight, we decided we had had enough. We had recaptured 98 of the 200 bullfrogs. We put them into those large, those 5-gallon buckets, those white buckets with lids. And then we put the containers into a storage area in the nature center and went home. The next morning, when I came back and I opened the door to that storage area, 98 bullfrogs. Little did I know that we didn't put the lids on tight enough and they popped them off. So we recaptured 97 bullfrogs and we gave them to the East Bay Vivarium. It's a business in Berkeley that raises reptiles and amphibians. They were thrilled to have the bullfrogs. They were going to freeze them which is really a humane way of killing the frogs because they just go to sleep from the cold and they don't wake up. And then they would, over time thaw them out and they would feed them to a large South American snake they had that eats bullfrogs. Because you see, on the East Coast where the bullfrogs are native, they do have predators. But on the West Coast, not many things will eat bullfrogs. Now you might be wondering, 97? What, 90s? Well, we thought we caught them all. But then a few years later, when we were really cleaning out that storage area, we found one dried up, petrified bullfrog. Well, over the years, we just continued to try catching the bullfrogs whenever we saw them. It took us 10 years to rid the area of those Chinese New Year's bullfrogs and their offspring. You might be wondering, well, how do you know that you got rid of them? Well, for those 10 years, whenever you'd walk down to the lake, you would hear, barum, 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 bullfrogs. But after those 10 years, if you walked down to the lake in the springtime, all you would hear was ribbit, 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 ribbit. Thank you.
Yay, great story. Great story.
Beautiful story. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Linda. That was a hilarious story, and I had no idea about bullfrogs like that. That's really funny. And I'm glad you managed to get them all, even except for the one. Although, to have him dried or have him frozen, I mean, really, what a choice. Anyway, thank you. That was a great story. So our next storyteller, we're going to move straight on, is Heather Forrest. Heather is a beautiful, gentle, lovely soul, and she's a storyteller who blends music and song with poetry and prose, all of it into her work. She's been telling stories now for over 30 years, even though she looks like she hasn't been doing it for more than 10. She's recorded 8 award-winning albums, written over 7 children's picture books, and was the recipient of the Circle of Excellence Award from the National Storytelling Network. She's performed just about anywhere you can possibly perform if you're storytelling, including the Smithsonian Institute at Jonesboro, the Museum of Modern Art in New York, and even a festival in New Zealand. That must have been nice in the before times, obviously. She was also on our Halloween show last year. It's called Friday Fright Night. Again, that's available free of charge on either our website or YouTube, so go and check that out. She tells a fantastic story. So we're going to put all the links to all where you can get hold of Heather, and she's got some stuff coming up, which we'll hear about later as well. But before we hear her story, please let's welcome Heather Forrest to our virtual stage to get to know her a bit better. Hi, Heather. How are you?
Oh, fine. Thanks for having me here.
Good. Well, it's lovely to be here. Now, Heather, you live in South Huntington, New York, and you run an organic family farm, don't you? So what's that like? Is that a ton of work, or is that not as bad as it sounds?
I know a lot of people that have what they call day jobs, and they work 9 to 5. When you're a farmer, you work 5 to 9. It's a lot of work, but very satisfying to know how to grow your own food. And at this time in our lives, we've sold most of the farm to a not-for-profit that utilizes it as a training place for autistic young adults. And what we have left of the farm, we have a very, very large garden, and mostly we grow to give away to the local food pantry. Food is a right, and it's wonderful to be able to contribute to the health and benefit of people in our community that don't have enough.
God, that's a lovely thing to do. Oh, so you are lovely, Heather. What a nice person you are. And also, during this pandemic, you must have been quite happy, like when everything started and there was like, there's not going to be any food in the shops. You had your own farm. You must have been like, yeah, well, see, if we'd all grown organic veg, you'd all have it.
Oh, well, we have a wonderful politic of housework where I live. My husband cooks for half of the year. He begins October 15th till April 15th, and I cook from April 15th till October 15th. and we've been doing this for almost 40 years. And I get the part of the year to cook when cooking means going out to the garden to see what's ripe and ready. So I got a really good part of the deal.
Oh, fantastic. What an interesting way of doing it. I've never heard of that before. That's really funny.
We both like to cook, and it's wonderful to not have the psychological responsibility to be shopping and planning and refrigerator managing for half of the year. It's the time when I'm not cooking, I have hours extra a day for my art. It's a gift that we give each other.
How fantastic. How lovely. Now, Heather, you also, as I was saying, you sing, you play guitar, you write poetry, you're an author. Gosh, what aren't you? So you're used to blending and mixing different techniques together. So how do you feel about this weaving a traditional story with a personal tale?
Oh, I think it's a wonderful challenge to think about as everybody is building new work, because, well, first of all, folk tales are metaphorical by nature. And so there could be a theme that emerges in the folktale that just might remind you of something that has happened in your own life. And vice versa, or vice versa, when someone's personal story rises to the level of metaphor that everyone can relate to on some universal level, there might just be, and likely is, a folktale that resonates with that universal theme. So it can go either way. And I think tonight people will see it go in both directions, starting with a folktale and weaving a personal story, or beginning with a personal story and weaving in a folktale.
Lovely. And I remember going to a workshop of yours where you ignited an interest in me about just this thing. I just haven't had the time or the cleverness to do it yet. So I'm going to be like a masterclass tonight to listen to you all. So Heather, get yourself ready. Everyone sit back and let's welcome to our virtual stage Heather Forrest with her story.
I am a hard-working solo storytelling artist who sets ambitious goals for myself, and then I work really hard to reach them. For example, most recently, I was ambitiously determined to be able to play a very difficult guitar piece I made for myself 30 years ago called The Nightingale, which I don't perform now because it's just too hard to play. But I committed to perform it in a festival, a summer festival coming up. And so I had to practice, and I did every single day for 2 months until I could play that piece well. 2 days before the concert, I was busy rushing around in the kitchen, making a cucumber salad from the garden with my brand new sharp kitchen tool, a mandolin, and I sliced the top of my guitar picking thumb at all. And as I tended my foolish self-inflicted injury, I was reminded of something that happened to me when I was much younger. When I was about 45 or so, I remember that one of my greatest ambitions was to be able to travel and see the world through storytelling. And so I was very, very excited when I received an invitation from the Jakarta International Storytelling Festival in Indonesia. I flew there on my own, and I stayed in a world-class hotel in downtown Jakarta, Le Cristal. It's right across the street from the Dunkin' Donuts. Well, the festival was a grand success, and afterwards there was maybe 1 or 2 days, that's all I had left, for some further adventure. And so I decided that I would go and visit Borobudur. I'd heard some people in the lobby talking about it at the hotel. It's the largest Buddhist monument in the world and a UNESCO heritage site, and it's in central Java, an airplane ride away from where I was. But I am ambitious by nature, and so I bought myself a plane ticket, and I hired an English-speaking tour guide named Annie, who just so happened to be an expert in Hindu and Buddhist philosophy. She was a graduate student studying at the university. I arranged that she would meet me at the airport when I landed in Yogyakarta. A blast of hot air hit my face as I stepped out of the plane, and I was very relieved to see Annie waiting for me at the gate. She held a sign with my name. As I came closer, I saw that she was wearing a very, very short pencil skirt, a crisp white blouse, a wide smile, and very sturdy hiking shoes. I suspected that they were a hint of what was to come, and I was glad I decided to wear my sneakers. "Welcome, welcome," she said, and she herded me off to a beat-up old taxi. We traveled about an hour down a bumpy dirt road past farms and rice paddies, making our way to a very large, fertile valley that was ringed with mountains, 2 volcanoes, and lush rainforests. I felt my heart jump to my throat when I saw it up ahead. Borobudur, like a giant pyramid against the morning sky. Annie saw it at the same moment, and she said, there it is, Borobudur. It was built out of carved volcanic rock from this valley 1,200 years ago. It is a gigantic 3-dimensional mandala and a shrine to the Buddha. Pilgrims have been coming here for centuries to walk the path to its top, for each section of Borobudur represents higher and higher levels of consciousness. The taxi let us off at the site, and as we walked toward the huge structure, I noticed the boulders. There were huge boulders surrounding the base, and I asked Annie about it, and she said, the base of Borobudur is covered with carvings that describe the terrible things that people do to one another. They're so horrible that these pictures have been covered over by boulders. There's only one panel that's visible. Come, I'll show you. And I walked with her to the one exposed panel, and I saw, carved in the stone, a picture of someone whispering a rumor into another person's ear. Annie turned around and said, "Well, Heather, are you ready for a long walk to enlightenment?" The best way to understand Borobudur is to walk the path, as pilgrims have done for centuries. Well, I could use a little enlightenment, maybe a lot, I said, and I tightened up my sneaker laces and I followed her. She took me over to some steep stone steps, which we climbed, and we entered a pathway, an open-aired path that was walled on either side and wound like a labyrinth around 5 square terraces. The sides of these walls along the path were covered with carvings. Annie drew my attention to the carvings on my right as we walked clockwise around the structure. She said, "Look here, this side of the wall path tells about the Buddha's life. Here it begins with his mother having a dream about a white elephant. But you might be interested. Look over here. On the other side of the path, on this left side wall, it's covered with stories, tales of the Buddha in his previous lives as animals. This section celebrates his compassionate nature. Look at this one. Here he's depicted as a parrot. He's putting out a gigantic forest fire by carrying water in his beak, 1 drop at a time." "Annie, I know that story. It's a Jataka tale, a Hindu story from India. And she said, ah, yes, yes. The people who built Borobudur made the biggest picture book in the world. They built it as a teaching tool to show the people in the community that they could embrace Buddhism, for they knew Buddha so well through the stories they already knew. But these were the tales that they knew of Buddha's pre-incarnate form. We stood on the path, swapping tales in front of the carvings, back and forth for a long time. And I was saying to myself, oh my goodness, I'm walking with a wellspring of stories, and I get Annie to myself all day. What a treasure. I don't know why I said the next thing. I said, but didn't you say that it's a long walk to the top? Maybe we should get going before it gets even hotter than it is, for it was getting warmer as the morning went on. And so we climbed up, and around the terraces we went. As we went up each layer of those square terraces, the steps were steep, and soon my shirt was stuck to my back and I was breathing hard, but I just kept on going. We finally emerged from the shady walled pathway into the blazing midday sun and walked the path around 3 circular platforms, which were dotted with 72 stupas. These forms were bell-shaped hollow sculptures with holes in their sides, and inside of the stupas, each one held a statue of the Buddha meditating with his hands in a symbolic gesture, a mudra. And he pointed out, look, the ones here on the lower platforms have holes you can look through and see the sculpture, but they're diamond-shaped, tippy, she said, just tippy. But as we go higher and higher, you'll see the holes change. They'll be square-shaped, much more balanced. Up we went. Higher and higher and higher on the mandala we went. I was growing hotter and hotter and more weary, and looking ahead to see how much farther we needed to go. I noticed the top, and I called back to Annie, Annie, what's in the big stupa, the big one at the top? What's in it? And she said, enlightenment. And she paused to look out at the vast landscape around us. Slow down, Heather, she said. Enjoy where we are now. You'll get there soon enough. Annie was walking much slower than I was because she stopped and she looked into every single one of those 72 stupas, while I was busy thinking, what could possibly be in the big stupa that represents enlightenment? Oh, I know, it's a gem. No. It's a relic. No. It's an epiphany of a sculpture, a sacred scroll driven by my ambition, my curiosity, my deep desire to know what was in the big stupa at the top. I left Annie with all her wonderful stories, and in spite of the heat and my very tired legs, I sprinted the rest of the way to the top. And when I got to the big stupa, I looked in and I discovered the big stupa at the top holds an empty chamber. That was 28 years ago. Now, at 73, I can look back at my rushing and see the folly of it. That's how I cut off the tip of my thumb. I was rushing. I can still hear my grandma Sadie's voice in my head. She would always say, why is everybody always rushing? For what? What? To be the first one in the grave? Oh, after all that work and rehearsal, I couldn't play the guitar at all. And since I couldn't play the nightingale, I was about to withdraw from the concert, of course, until I bumped into another old bird under the net. My friend Rita, who said, Heather, maybe you could tell a different story in the concert, one that doesn't use the guitar. I had never even thought of that. I was so intently focused on being able to play the nightingale that I completely forgot that I knew any other stories. In the end, I told a different story. My thumb healed and all was well. You know, at 73, I am still learning that flapping my wings with others, for I was standing in that place, round those walls, looking at those pictures. And the only story that came to my mind to share with Annie was the one about the flock of birds. I said, Annie, my favorite one is about a hunter. He came to a tree and he saw there was a flock of birds pecking seeds under that tree. And all he could think of was his dinner. And so he took his net and he threw the net over the flock of birds. But all at once, those birds, they began to flap their wings together. Up, up, up they rose, taking the net with them. They came down on the top of a tree. And as the net caught and snagged in the tree's branches, the birds flew down and out from under it to freedom. The hunter looked up in amazement, and said, how did they do that? He had to climb up and drag the net down and bring it home with him. The next day he came back. He threw the net over the flock of birds who were still pecking there, and once again the birds flapped their wings, rose that net up, put it on top of the tree, and he had to climb up after they'd freed themselves and drag it back down again. They did this to his net every day, but he returned every day, and every day he lost his net. You might wonder, why would he do this? Well, he thought, one day they'll bicker. And sure enough, one day, under the net, one of the birds rushing about bumped into another and stepped on its tail. And that bird turned around and said, whoa, don't push me, who do you think you are? And another older bird stepped forward and said, now, we must be calm. This is a time of danger. We must work together. The hunter is coming. And another bird turned around and said, so who made you the king of the birds? Well, as the birds quarreled and bickered and fought, the hunter arrived and they all were caught. He scooped up the net and declared, I'm the winner. United they're strong, divided their dinner. Annie laughed and she said, you see, I told you it's a Buddhist tale. The Buddha is the old quail under the net, counseling for cooperation and peace. You know Jataka tales. I love them, I said, and now at 73, flapping my wings with others, instead of barging ahead alone, is how I survive.
Wonderful.
Ooh, wonderful, beautiful.
Thank you so much, Heather. Beautiful.
Beautiful, beautifully done.
Lovely. What a amazing story. Gosh, Heather, thank you so much. And I can't believe, cutting your finger off with a mandolin. Oh, it's made me cringe. And I know exactly about that rushing. I just did that recently and fell over and hurt myself. So as Nancy in our Zoom audience said, it's another lesson in poly. Looks brilliant. And you're all climbing up bloody mountains. What are you all like? It's very impressive. Now, a couple of people in the YouTube. So Bowen Lee, Linda said let's do a Bay Area event again. So she's in. So well done. We'll get together because I might be in too. And I love it. Damon, he's watching from Mo's living room in just his underwear. Does Mo know this? Too much information, I feel. All right, thank you, Heather. Lovely. I'm glad you're okay. So let's now get on to our final teller, who is the fabulous Laura Sims. Now, Laura, if you don't know her, is an internationally acclaimed storyteller, a recording artist, a coach, a writer. She's everything. She's been telling braided stories for about 40 years. So, of course, we had to have her on this show because she's like our shining example. She's a contributing editor to Parabola magazine and is the artistic director of the Hans Christian Andersen Storytelling Center in New York. And they've just been doing a whole load of shows, which I think are still available. So you can go and have a look at those, go and search them on Facebook. She's also, as if that wasn't enough, she's a senior research fellow at Rutgers University Peace Center under the auspices of UNESCO. She won the Sesame Street Sunny Days Award. Isn't that lovely? I want to win the Sesame Street Sunny Days Award for her work with children, and has appeared at the Nobel Peace Festival in Oslo. She's also been all over the world in festival and theatres. She's won she was nominated for a runner-up for a Grammy for a book. She's written 5 books, and she's even saved a zoo. I mean, really, she should be knighted. Where's the Queen when you need her? We'll put all the. I'll have a word, Laura. Don't worry. I'll put all the links. My co-host will put all the links in the chat. So go and check her out. So now, before we let her tell her story, we're going to get to know Laura a bit better. I feel a bit intimidated already. So please welcome to our virtual stage, Laura Sims. Hi, Laura. How are you? Oh, you're muted, Laura. I can't hear you.
Oh, then you didn't hear me say how happy I am to be here.
That is going to be the epitaph of this pandemic, isn't it? You're on mute. I did it last show. So now you live in Manhattan, don't you? I
live on Broadway.
What a fabulous place for you to live. It's like a meeting of minds, isn't it?
I know sometimes, when you're performing somewhere in the world and people don't know storytelling, they say, have you ever been on Broadway? I get to say, all the time.
How fantastic. I used to work very close to like the London version of that, which is like Piccadilly. So I know what you mean. Now, as I said, Laura, you've been combining traditional with personal narrative for years and years and years. So how did you first get into doing this, and why did you first get into doing it?
Well, it was a kind of accident. But I did a late night adult storytelling show for WBAI. And this was so long ago. And I was always telling traditional stories. And I was married to a musician. We had people from the World Music Institute who were performing, but they were often great storytellers. They came on. But it was really difficult to create programs over and over again. So I began filling in by telling adventures of my cat and my dog and my life living sort of in Spanish Harlem in 6th floor tenement. And then I began to get letters from people who would say how much they loved those stories. And so I began framing traditional stories with true life stories. And in a crisis in my life, when I thought I should really tell a big story, I began working on Demeter and Persephone. But how I did it was I would write 2 sentences on one side of a page, and then on the other side, I would write about something that had happened in my life. And then I began realizing that for people, it was really kind of, for me, it was great. It was luscious for people because we don't really have an in very often to these great traditional stories, and they were like museum pieces. But for me, they're deeply personal. And then, as Heather was referring, that the personal stories are deeply mythic. So by mixing them together, you really can feel the mirror of the stories into each other. And I just find it sort of a delight. I love doing it, and I love helping people to do it, actually.
Yeah, because you do teach this, don't you?
I do. Well,
how do you teach people how to find the right traditional story to go with their personal story? I mean, how does that work?
Well, you so much have to trick people into not trying to figure out something that makes sense, but something that rises up. And so by having people journal I asked them, for instance, what place in the story they really love or what place they really don't like, and what happens in that place in the story, and then what in their own life comes to mind that has the energy of that. So that it's, and then the traditional story just starts coming up. The meaning, the levels of meaning of the traditional story start coming up, and people find sort of a new way of framing their personal story. So I don't know if that
How
makes
interesting. I know, we've only got a very short time, I know, but that was really interesting. You know, love to take one. I have to come and take one of your classes, won't I?
I would be thrilled and humbled.
Lovely. And so I think that's what we've got time for now, Laura. So everyone sit back, relax. Let's listen to the master at work. So let's listen to Laura Sims tell her story.
One afternoon, I heard the sound of a pigeon right outside my window. And there was a bird that I had seen on the street who was lame. It was missing all the talons of its feet, and it had taken refuge in a bowl on my fire escape. So I tried to slowly open the window so I could give the bird some food, and was terrified and flew away. And I simply began to weep because by helping it, I had sent it away from its place of safety. And that made me think about my mother. When I was 11 years old, my mother, who was a concert pianist, had a stroke. And she began to play piano with one hand. And I would take my dolls and climb under the piano. And sometimes I would feel exalted because she played with such passion. It was like she was playing with two hands. And other times I could hear her crying. And when she died 10 years after the initial stroke, in which she was always lame with a brace, metal brace, and a cane for walking, my brother couldn't come to the funeral, so he sent me a Hawaiian piece of tapas cloth, beautiful, as a gift. And it's made from the inside of the bark of a mulberry tree, absolutely beautiful. So I was in my 20s, a Hawaiian story about an old lame woman who made tapas cloth. And I told it, I love telling it, but you know how it is, you have a story and then it disappears, like slides out of your repertory like a forgotten dream. The day that I heard the bird, I was recalling my first Manhattan date with Gary Hoffman, who took me from Brooklyn to Manhattan to the Village Vanguard. And because of that memory, suddenly, the story from Hawaii just came back with a force. Hina was an old woman. She had been a goddess, but she'd fallen in love with a mortal, a fisherman named Aikanaka, which means flesh eater. This I kind of understand. So she gave up her life as a goddess and lived making tapas, cooking for him, bearing children. But when she was old, she was weary. She had a longing to go back to the sky realm from where she had come. One afternoon, she was on the beach. She saw the sun and she thought, oh, If I could just go to the sun and go back home. She was a goddess. So the sun heard her, sent down a rainbow bridge to the beach, and she started walking up the sky. But the closer she got to the sun, the hotter it was. Her skin was burned. She thought, I am such a fool. And she went back to the earth. I also understand this. Now, that evening, when she went to get the shrimp baskets from the sea, she looked at the moon. So cool, so far away. She thought, if I could just go to the moon. The moon heard her, sent down a moonbeam bridge. So she started walking up the bridge when her husband, Aikanaka, came running down onto the sand. Hina, where are you going? Who's going to cook my dinner? You didn't even bring in the shrimp baskets. And he started running up the bridge, and he pulled her by the leg. She said, I'm going to the moon. I have spent my whole life working with you. Hina, you have to come back. And he pulled her. But she, with all her force, that old woman, she pushed him, and he slid right down the moonbeam bridge to the beach. But Hina was lame. She walked slowly, but she just kept going, just like my mother. My mother at the piano with one hand on the keys playing and the other just sitting there on the wood. She just kept going 4, 5 hours a day. When Hina stopped, she had been looking down the whole time. She wanted to see how far away the moon was. But the moonbeam bridge was gone. She looked back down. The road to the earth had disappeared. Oh, she thought, I really am a fool. So she closed her eyes, and in that silence, she remembered the ancient karakia of her mother and her grandmothers. When words and sound were magic. That's what made me think of the story and Gary Hoffman going to the village vanguard. My mother bought me a sleeveless black dress. I think she let me go and was approving because I really specialized in Italian boys and Gary was Jewish. So I could wear the sleeveless dress on the condition, this was the 1960s, that I had a cardigan and gloves. By the time I got to the bank on the corner where I was going to meet Gary, I had taken off the cardigan and just had stuffed it behind a bush beside the bank. I'd taken off the gloves, put them in my purse. There was Gary. We went on the subway. We went to Greenwich Village to 7th Avenue and went down the steps into the jazz club. I was overwhelmed by the murmuring sound of conversation and the musicians on the stage warming up and tuning their instruments. It was exhilarating. Gary and I, the youngest people in the vanguard, were excited and a little awkward. So we went and sat at a table in the back. We had drinks. They didn't even ask how old we were. All of a sudden, it was quiet. And this little Jewish man in a vest and dungarees, half bald, with a ponytail, got up and he said, "Welcome to the village vanguard." And then he moved to the side. And a woman came onto the stage. Tall, slim, black woman in a long gown. Her hair pulled back, and she went to the front of the stage and she just moved back and forth like a reed in the wind. And then she went to the grand piano and she put her hands over the keyboard without playing a note. From underneath the subway and the street, there came a sound. She started to sing. Black, black, black is the color. And the little man on the side said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Nina Simone." And the room went wild. My whole body felt like I could explode. She put her hands on the keyboard, and out from under the cacophony of all those people applauding, she began to sing. I had never heard anything so beautiful. The musicians started playing. It was so remarkable. I felt like the walls of the vanguard opened. And by the end of that evening, I thought to myself, if I do anything in my lifetime, I want to do it with the passion and the feeling of her voice. Hina gave up hope of going anywhere. And then she began to chant the ancient chant of her mother. And when she opened her eyes, she was on the moon. She wasn't lazy. She was still making tapas, but now she was making the clouds in the sky. I got off the subway. I found my cardigan, put on the gloves, went into my house. Of course, my mother had waited up and was in the kitchen. I could see her left leg extended with the black shoe and the metal brace and the cane leaning against the chair. And I thought about how she sat at the piano like Nina Simone, waiting with one hand for the music to move through her body. And I put my arms around her. I wish now that I had said to her how much I loved her. But the truth is that it is never too late. And in this story, I say it. It is understood that when the world is on fire, that if we remember the ancient songs of our mothers and our grandmothers and the old stories, even the stories of our own lives, and we tell them, we not only make tapas, but Hina hears us on the moon. She lifts up the stones that often keep the tapas to dry, throws them against each other, and brings the rain. She is called Hina, loco, lame woman of the moon. And that's that.
Oh, stunning, Laura.
Wow.
Stunning. Amazing. Thank you.
Ah, you're a goddess. You are a goddess. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Laura. Wow, that was a masterclass. What a fabulous story. And wow, to see Nina Simone. God, that sounded amazing. Oh, how lucky. How lucky. And how lucky we were that you're on our show, and how lucky that we've all been to have all these amazing storytellers. So I would just like now to bring them all back, and we can all just give them a huge round of applause and just find out what they're all up to now, because I'm sure you'll want to go and see them. So I'm going to bring back Mo Reynolds. Mo, hi. So what have you got coming up?
Wow, I look
Wrong person. That's not Mo. It's Zoom, it moves people around. Sorry about that. That was one of our Zoom audience. No, hi. So thank you so much. I loved your story. It's absolutely.
Oh, thank you.
What have you got coming up?
Well, if you're in Montana, then there's a lot coming up. But if you're not, then, you know. But yeah, with Humanities Montana is a great group, and I get to actually travel around Montana or via Zoom right now until the cases kind of calm down in Montana. And I do workshops just about blending our personal stories with folk tales and trying to look at our personal stories in a new way as we sort of couch them in stories that we've known for a really long time, and we discover new things about both. So, and then I'm always adding to my YouTube channel, which is Mo Reynolds, if you look on YouTube. And you can also find me at moreynolds.com. So I'm always trying to add new content and new locations to the YouTube channel. And yeah, so that's what's coming up.
Lovely. Thank you, man. Thank you for your fabulous story.
Thank you.
Linda Yemoto, can we find you without too much trouble? It's a little bit difficult in Zoom sometimes.
Oh, there I am.
Hi, Linda.
Hi.
Sorry, Liz, you're still on our screen. You did our honorary guest. Linda, what have you got coming up?
That's funny. Liz and I are neighbors. Literally, more episodes for Asian American Storytopia. We, as I said, we release a new one every 2 weeks, and we're working on one with spooky stories for October. Ooh. And then the virtual tours for the Asian Museum in San Francisco are going to start up soon too. So that'll keep me busy.
And hopefully no toads. Excellent. Thank you, Linda, and a fabulous story. And Heather Forrest, thank you so much for your amazing story. And what have you got coming up, Heather?
Well, actually, on September 30th, Laura Sims and Milbury Birch and I are doing another set together as The Gathering called A Field of Flowers, A Rain of Ash. And we invite people to come and listen to some stories on the theme of the evening, and an opportunity for a kind of a salon conversation about the stories. And now I'm very busy preparing for a live performance on November 6th as part of the United Solo Festival in New York City on Theater Row. So I'm actually going to be on Broadway with Earth Song, the piece that I did for Mother's Day, a celebration of Mother Earth. And
fabulous.
Put a link up there if anybody's interested in the New York area and want to come see live theater. It's pretty exciting. It's a tiny theater. It's called the Studio Theater. There are 50 seats in it. I think there are about 12 tickets left, so it's almost sold out. And I'm nervous but excited at the same time. They were very similar emotions, right?
Yes. Oh, well, best of luck. I wish I could fly over to New York at the moment and come too. And Laura, let's bring Laura Sims back.
Well,
Hi, Laura.
my ticket, Heather, if there's only 12 left.
What have you got coming up, Laura?
Well,
With the show with Heather.
Monday, the inimitable Megan Wells, who is here with Janice Del Negro, sponsoring or curating Moonshine Stories, Singing Moon. And so I'm telling stories with Ed Stivenger and Ethnotech, and then on the 30th with Milbury and Heather, which should be really lovely as usual. And I'm finishing writing a book that I've been working on for 8 years called Wild Rose, Summoning the Restoration of the World. And it's all about storytelling. It's based on one Romanian fairy tale. My family's from Romania. And commentary and botany. And I'm really excited about finishing that. And the book that I did after 9/11 called Becoming the World is being revised and republished by a small publisher here in New York.
Fabulous. Wow, such a lot going on. Well, thank you for all of you, from taking time out of your busy lives to be here. Let's all give them a big round of applause. Fantastic. You've got lots of love on YouTube, so go and have a look at those comments later. And then before we end our show, I just want to pass you over to my co-producer, Regina Stoops, because we've got some amazing shows coming up, and I just want to tell you quickly about those. Well, Regina's going to tell you. So, Regina, over to you.
Great. Thank you, Claire. Thank you, everyone. Lovely to be here. Those were wonderful stories. And I felt, Liz Nichols, I felt like maybe we should ask you what you have coming up, since you're up there on the screen for so long and you bought the bounteous backstage pass. We do appreciate that. Thank you very much, all of you, for supporting storytelling and our storytellers. So what we have coming up is our second Wednesday open mic, which is going to be October 13th. So those of you that think, hey, maybe what would it be like to get up and tell a story? This is a great way to find out. The theme is frightful. So a true personal story on the theme of frightful. And then Thursday, Thriller is coming up on October 28th. There's the ad for that. And we're very excited to have Ethnotech, Adam Booth, Ingrid Nixon, and Jeff Gear to tell spooky stories to chill and delight, frightful tales to keep you awake at night, something like that. It was a really clever ditty that I can't remember. But October 28th, and those tickets are for sale. And then once again, our open mic story slam, which will be the second Wednesday in November 2nd. That one is starting over, just like the Pilgrims did. And then on December 8th, we will have our final of the year, our open mic story slam snowball, when things get out of control. Stories about chaos and things snowballing out of control. So tickets are now available for the Frightful open mic and the Thursday Thriller, and coming soon for the other shows. The best way to find out what's happening and stay up to date would be to probably follow us on our Eventbrite. I think that's when you would get notified, or of course, our website has the information as well. So thank you very much. Lovely, Claire. I'll hand it back to you to close it out. Take you, everyone.
Thank you, Regina. I don't think we've ever been so organised with all our upcoming shows since we started nearly 2 years ago. So yes, took a lot of work. And thank you so much to everybody. We really appreciate you coming to YouTube and putting all those comments in. And let's say hello for the last time to our backstage audience. Thank you for being here. It really does. It's so nice seeing friendly faces when you're telling a story and when you're emceeing. It's fabulous. So thank you all for being here and for being so supportive. Please look out and come to one of our other shows. You can obviously rewatch us if you want to, because it's on the same link. So thank you very much for being here, and we'll see you next time. We're going to stay and have a party.
Good night, YouTube. Thank you, YouTube audience. Thanks to everyone on YouTube. We very appreciated. Love the comments.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks. Bye.
6 feet apart, 6 feet apart. It's the newest thing to do. Stay 6 feet apart, 6 feet apart. The distance between me and you. 6 feet apart, 6 feet apart. And when I say I'll keep you very close to my heart, it's purely metaphorical. metaphorical. These times are quite historical, so step aside, let's live our lives 6 feet apart.